Welcome, everybody, to the new Son of Sam Chronicles. I'm RockerMike. We got Rob Rossi, top left. We got Chris Jr., bottom left. And, of course, Carl Denaro, bottom right. First of all, this is the first show of 2023. I'd like to wish everybody a happy new year. We haven't been on in a little over a month. We took a little hiatus for the holidays and to do some research. Chris has been doing some incredible research. We're going to get into some of that today. And what we're going to mainly talk about, at least in the beginning here, is information regarding the data dump that happened over the summer that a lot of people, and we all think mistakenly take it as a magic bullet as to solving the case and this and that. We know it wasn't. We've said that in many shows. But there's some very interesting discrepancies in certain people's testimonies given to Lifer, the DA, and Arminetti, I think his name is the other guy. Okay. Mainly around weak Carr, Fred Diegel. Okay. And other things that were said that we're going to go into today to talk about it. Carl, you wanted to kind of say something here in the beginning?
No, all right. I just, I just wanted to level set, and here's the bottom line. I don't know the answers. I don't know who's involved. As everyone knows, a lot of the information that I carry with me is from Maury Terry. But with that said, as you pointed out, the data dump. Some people took that data dump and used it to totally discredit Maury Terry's theory, and that's cool. You're welcome to do whatever you want. I looked at that same information, and although I think there was enough information in there for me to continue supporting Maury Terry's theory. As you mentioned, we're going to talk about weak Carr. I'm not throwing weak Carr under the bus. I have no idea. But what I do know is weak Carr's story is only backed up by weak Carr. So for her story to be true, that means Maury Terry was lying, David Berkowitz was lying, Fred Diegel was lying, the two cops from North Dakota, Knoop and Gardner, were lying.
Right.
Phil Falcon was lying. Tom Turkey was lying. And there's probably more that I forgot. But it's kind of, I just can't believe that 8 people can basically tell the same story about John Carr, and weak Carr refutes that story. So it's either weak Carr is leaving some information out, or 7 or 8 people who were interviewed were lying, and that sounds highly improbable to me.
Right.
And one last thing I want to say, I don't feel like we're throwing anyone under the bus. Names have been associated with this case for the last 47 years. Including mine for obvious reasons. But over the last couple of years, personally, my character's been assassinated. Things have been made up about me with no proof. I know they're not true, but once you spit it out there, some people are going to believe it. My stepfather has been brought into this case as one of the reasons why I was shot, which is total bullshit.
Yeah.
My mother has been brought into the case as some kind of banking operative that married my rich stepfather. None of that's true, except that my mother did marry Gus Jacobs, who did work for Citibank, but that's kind of far-fetched. My own father, my real father, has been accused of being part of the Denaro mafia.
In Italy.
In Italy, and as we all know, Matt Denaro was the head of the been on the run for 30 years and was just arrested last week in Italy. We do share the same name, and who knows, at some point down the line, maybe I am distant related to him, but I can assure you guys and all the viewers that I have nothing to do with the mafia. I think I put this on Facebook, but it's kind of like a New York thing. People living outside New York, they just assume you're Italian and you live in New York. You must be involved.
You must be in the mob. Yeah, no, if you have a vowel at the end of your
right,
name,
and then you throw in Matteo. Point I'm making, I'm not saying I guess I am saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander. A lot of people's names have been brought up. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but just keep that in mind as this show progresses and we refute stuff that some people think is gospel truth. That's the end of mine. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Okay, that's no problem. I think rule of thumb is this: if you're microwaving ragu sauce for your spaghetti on Sundays, you're going to make comments like, Carl Denaro must be involved with the mafia or something.
Yeah, I mean, he's from New York City. He's Italian. He's in the mob.
Forget about it.
Yeah,
he's on Tuesday.
If you're eating spaghetti out of a can in Ohio, you might think that.
So, look, I mean, there's no lie, guys. I mean, there is a contingent, possibly you could call it a growing contingent, that believe Berkowitz acted alone. I think some of this has to do with the fact that the People vs. David Berkowitz website came out, and people looked at information there, and they kind of looked at each piece as an individual piece. I think when you take a step back and you start looking at it from the 50,000 foot view, I think it's a gift for us. I think there's so much good information in there, a lot of which makes Maury Terry's story more believable. I've said it on past shows, there's stuff in there, especially in the police reports, that ended up in the book, and Maury didn't change anything. The information's there. Right. People are gonna draw different conclusions, regardless of who they are, because everyone interprets information a little bit differently. I'm giving you my opinion. I disagree with most people that say the People vs. David Berkowitz website and the information within it is bad for the case. Well,
some people believe, Chris, that it destroys the cult theory. Okay, and it certainly doesn't do that. In fact, I believe the anonymous person that has put out this information believes in the cult theory. So it wasn't put out there for that purpose. But you've done a lot of research, especially in the last month, and I want to give you the show now and just tell us your opinions, what you think, what you found, related to these discrepancies in people's testimonies to the DA.
I can't wait to do that. So, look, one of the biggest Maury Terry detractors is Carr. Everyone knows it. One of the biggest. I don't blame her. If it were my family, I'd defend them to the death, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just the way I am. I can respect that. Based on the audio provided, as well as the police reports, my opinion, her public comments today and private comments back in 79 just don't add up. I'm going to go through a couple of elements of her interview on October 26th and also talk about some of the things she's been saying now, you know, through, you know, both privately and publicly. I think we all know that she talks publicly on social media. She's commented on our YouTube channel, YouTube shows, Facebook, etc. And I think she's also talked to some of us privately. So, what was she saying in '79? The first thing, and I think it's really important. You know, she talks about her brother's apparent suicide, and she lays out her case for it not being a suicide. I think that's important because, you know, one of the craziest things in this case is the fact that a guy that Berkowitz mentioned as being in a cult, you know, suicides himself after the case is closed. It's one of those clean up on aisle 9 type things. You know, you see it in these you know, the political drama conspiracy thrillers. Basically, you know, she says pretty succinctly, you know, he opened the PO box. He was going through the process of re-enrolling in school, and then all of a sudden he's found face down on the floor with the back of his head blown off. One of the interesting things she says when she's talking to the DA is she says that the gun was balanced on his heels.
Shotgun.
Yeah, the shotgun, which makes absolutely no sense unless somebody put it there, right? She also alleges that there was blood found in a totally different room, not splatter going, you know, through a doorway, but the way she explains it, I thought was somebody walked to a different room after shooting her brother, and some blood ended up in that other room. I don't know if any of this has ever been followed up on. It's not really something I've spent a lot of time on. I'm hoping that maybe someone watching the video can comment and maybe give their opinion, or if you guys looked into it. I just find that pretty interesting.
Chris, one thing I want to add, the story that I know with John's shooting, apparently there was a gun, a rifle, I believe, like just leaning up in the corner of the bedroom, and the gun that was used to kill John Carr was taken out of a box, which which is kind of strange, because if you're gonna kill yourself, I personally think it was murder, but why would you use the gun that's all boxed up in a shelf in the closet when there's a loaded rifle in the bedroom?
Yeah,
right.
And yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Don't you guys think it's strange that, you know, if you did try to kill yourself that way and you succeeded, how could the gun be balanced on your heels?
Well, right, yeah, I'm not even sure what balanced on the heels means, but there was a crime scene photo. I believe it's in The Ultimate Evil, but I think anyone who's been involved in this case has seen this picture. Yes. And it's John Carr laying on his back with his face blown off, not the back of his head, but his face blown off,
right.
With the rifle kind of like laying on his chest. You know, so I'm not even sure if that's what they mean, if that's what she means by the gun on his heels. I'm not. Really
I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I've shot shotguns. Okay, and they got quite a kick. Okay, right. So if you're in that position, and you know it's kind of gruesome what we're talking about here, but if you're in that position, I mean, I think the gun, when it goes off, maybe it's going to hit you, but it's gonna kick.
Right.
Okay, not far, but it's going to kick. It's not going to be lying on your chest like it just dropped there, because you know, it just, to me it doesn't add up. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the photo too, Carl. I mean, that's how I was kind of blown away with what she's saying, because I mean, you would imagine, you know, the sister of the victim or the deceased would have the most details of anyone, right? I mean, it appeared, we know from the audio that whenever John had a problem out in Minot, she was the one from the family to go out there and more or less get him back in shape or help him out or do whatever is needed to be done. I didn't even think about it when I was writing my notes, the actual photo. The actual photo is totally different from what she says in the audio. Maybe the body was moved after the fact and they took a second photo.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
But she said that Linda O'Connor, who found John, I think first, said that he was face down and the actual gun that he used was balanced on his heels, on the heels of his foot. So could he have shot himself and fall in the air? He falls forward, and then the gun just land on his. I don't know. I mean, it's not a cartoon. I don't even want to laugh about it. The guy's dead, but it's bizarre. I mean,
yeah.
The second thing she does is she confirms that John was home in June of '77. She states that he was at the Carr household in Yonkers the same time as the Carr-Cassara ordeal kind of unfolded. I think that's important because there's been a lot of debate as to whether or not John Carr was even in the area during the Son of Sam shootings.
Chris, hold on. Is that June of '76 or June of '77?
I believe that would be June of '77.
Okay, I'm not sure about that, but all right.
What did I screw up a date? I was late last night.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking the Cassara. Didn't the Cassara thing unfold early on and even before the Son of Sam shootings?
No. What I meant was when there was the letters going back and forth between.
We're talking about when the Carrs and the Cassaras got together and realized this is Berkowitz.
That was June of '77.
I
Yes,
believe that was 2 months.
Yes.
All right. That was
we went over that with Neil.
I stand corrected.
It's okay.
I think it's important that John Carr was actually in Yonkers during this time period because, as I just stated, I've heard people say that John Carr wasn't even around. There's no way he could have been involved in this thing, and blah 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 blah. The same old story and dance.
I believe. I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. I believe that Wheat has said publicly that he was not around because there was.
Yes.
He was in the military. There was airplane information, times, all that stuff, dates that he could have been on leave or whatever, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So and he was supposedly that's she says it. What?
I believe Carr said that her brother was overseas. He couldn't have been involved because he was overseas during the Son of Sam shootings. I don't think she was specific with months, but I think the statement I just made is pretty much verbatim what we just said.
Okay, but then she's saying that he was home in June of '77 in that interview, right, Chris?
Yes.
So there's some contradiction right there.
So another thing that she's been saying is, and I think she said this to you, Mike. I know she said it to other people that I've talked to, is the reason why Berkowitz was on the street longer than he should have been was because the police in Yonkers didn't like her father, weren't taking her father seriously. And they did everything they could to get this guy off the street. And that they were the heroes in all of this. In fact, somebody with another show said that much a while back, I remember. I just don't find that to be true. During the interview back in '79, she starts discussing a custody battle she's embroiled in for her stepkids. I believe she just was married earlier that year, and they were trying to take custody of the kids of her husband. And during this time period, Maury Terry headlines were hitting the papers about the potential conspiracy surrounding the Son of Sam murders. She has said that Maury has had a beef with the family predating Son of Sam, I guess going back to the 60s or early 70s or something.
The early 60s when he was a teenager. He got thrown out of her house.
So in her interview, she's talking about how she had a court hearing in a custody battle. For kids, I could tell she has some feelings for, and she doesn't bring that up. She knows the DA is sitting in her house because of Maury Terry. He's writing these stories. They're hurting her in court. She never makes any mention during that interview that she had an issue of some kind, or her family had an issue of some kind with Maury Terry.
Right. And you would think that would be something in the forefront of your mind.
100%.
Right. If this guy had a beef with your family because he got thrown out of the house for dirty language or something like that, when the father threw him out, when he was like 15, 16, something like that. It just, I don't know. To me, I can hold a grudge, but geez. Okay. I mean, you're going to hold a grudge. You're going to hold a grudge for 15 years before the Son of Sam shootings happened. Then you're going to implicate somebody that you're having the grudge on, and then spend the next 30 years doing that as well. So it just, does that make sense?
It does. Look, it boils down to this. That dog don't hunt, period. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
There couldn't have been anything that could have happened in the 60s or early 70s between Maury and
It may have happened. It may have happened. I mean,
what I'm saying, it could have happened, but it wasn't so bad that Maury Terry went on this crusade and lifelong, lifelong war with them.
It's one hell of a it's one hell of a, if that's true, Maury Terry went through a lot of hoops to concoct this whole story based on the fact that he was kicked out of the house when he was 16 years old. Right. I find that kind of hard to believe.
Yeah. And from what I know, he's Irish, not Sicilian, right? So he doesn't carry the vendetta that far, right?
Right, there you go, stereotyping again. Be careful.
I'm sorry. They exist because they're cool. What do you want from me? My grandmother used to say, you know what Italian Alzheimer's is? They forget everything but the vendetta.
Yeah.
So I mean, moving through her interview, she flat out says this, and I know she pulls back on this now, saying if there was video, you would see me shaking her head. She says flat out, John was interested in the occult. Period. End quote. Maybe I'm paraphrasing. I don't know, but it was something to that effect. He was into hard drugs and into the occult. I would believe what she's saying today. The problem is, I've got Tom Turkey confirming John was drawing the SOS logo as late or as early as February.
Now let's just tell the viewers, in case they don't know, who's Tom Turkey.
Tom Turkey was John Carr's, I believe, friend and roommate out in Minot.
Right.
Is that accurate?
I believe so.
There's so many of them now, but basically in his interview, they ask a ton of questions. And there's actually a lot of really good trinkets in that interview. But one that I found very interesting was the fact that, they basically say John was drawing the SOS logo. It's totally plausible that he was interested in the case and that he was also interested in the occult and saw that symbol and said, "Oh man, let me try to draw that. Let me try to master that symbol." That would make a ton of sense, right? But that would mean that he actually read the Son of Sam letters, right? So he would see John Wheaties. He would see.
Yeah, I mean, this is all in real time. This is not years later. This is not, it's not like he had the internet to go look it up. And, this was something that he knew the symbol. He knew it. It had to be.
In my opinion, yes. And the fact that he knew the symbol means, if he didn't know the symbol, it means he got the symbol from the papers. If he's reading the papers, I don't care how much drugs he's on. A light is going to flicker and say, this guy's talking about me, or he's talking about the neighborhood that I live in, that I grew up in, that I spent all my life in before I went into the Air Force. I think anyone reading that letter from that neighborhood, something should have flicked on. It's interesting to me that nobody said anything.
Carl, you were since you were an adult back then, and this you were involved with the whole thing when this was happening. Were people the letters themselves? They were published in a newspaper, right?
Yeah, yes, they were. Eventually, they were published, but
during the shootings.
Not well. Yeah, but by the time they were, as far as I know, they were all both letters were released. The letter to Borelli and the letter to what's his name, Jimmy Breslin.
Yes,
were released between, like, I don't know, February of 77 and June of 77. I know there was a delay. I'm not really sure what part of the Breslin letter. Just a small portion was released like a couple days after Breslin received it. And I think and that's, I'm going to say April, March or April, Breslin received a letter, and by the end of June, I believe the whole letter had been shown to the public.
Now that letter, I know the Borelli one didn't say it. The Breslin one, did that say Wheaties?
Yes.
The Borelli letter said
the Borelli.
So,
okay, I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
The Borelli one. Okay.
So that's when he listed, wicked 22 disciples of hell.
Yeah.
Wicker.
Wicker, King Wicker, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They were those,
so that was published. That was published for everybody to read in the paper. By June of 77.
I'm going to say by June, the public had access to all of that.
Where I'm going with it is just trying to elaborate on what Chris just said. Is if you're reading that and you're John Carr, if you're reading that in the paper, and you're John Carr, are you gonna? Is a light bulb gonna go off in your head?
Well, Chris kind of made that point already, and I never really thought about it, but I think Chris is spot on with anyone that lived in that neighborhood. When they see
Wicker.
I shouldn't say anyone that lives in a neighborhood, but anyone that was friends with John Carr or knew John Carr, knew what his nickname was, and knew where he lived. Between the John Wheaties moniker in that letter and the Wicker, Wicker Street is right around the corner from where John Carr grew up. So you would think somebody, and I'm sure some people from Yonkers actually did make some kind of connection, saying, "Well, that's kind of weird that
talking about us."
talking about John Wheaties and talking about Wicker Street. That's kind of puts a dot on the map. So I mean, to answer your question, and I know the point you're trying to make is when could have John Carr seen that letter printed in the paper, and I can't give you a specific answer, but I'm pretty confident in saying certainly by June of 77.
Okay.
He was writing the SOS logo in February of
77. February of 77. It wasn't even Son of Sam. It wasn't even 44 caliber. It wasn't even connected yet.
Right.
I've got it written down here that Turkey gave the date of the date range of, I think, February of 77 when he saw John writing that symbol.
There you go. Right. So that's something that doesn't make sense, or it does make sense, but it's not what they want you to think.
Right. And going back to he was interested in the occult thing. Again, I'd give Wheat a little bit more credence, but you got this guy, Phil Falcon, who recounts rituals that took place in his house. Mm-hmm. I believe a chicken was sacrificed.
Yeah.
Right. With a pentagram drawn on the floor.
Right.
I mean, these things happened, or maybe they didn't happen. They just made them all up. I don't know.
Well, again, to say what I said in the beginning of the show, it's like either everyone's lying or, there's some truth there. Maybe a lot of truth, but why would Phil Falcon make up a story that he walked in and saw, and I forget who the other guy was, but certainly John Carr was one of them, performing some kind of ritual with a chicken and a pentagram drawn on the floor. Why would he? That doesn't make any sense at all. I have to believe it's true. It just doesn't make sense. If you're gonna lie, why would you lie about something like that?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little bit concerning. And it kind of plays into some of the other things that Phil Falcon said about Wheat. Look, I'm not saying Wheat is involved in anything. I'm not saying Wheat did anything. What I'm saying is, based on what Phil Falcon says about how her own brother described her to him, was that she was a fixer, right? That she could fix anything. She can make anything all better. I think there was a little bit of talk about maybe her helping him out with the coffee shop or something like that. But at the Eagle's Nest, the place he owned, when I listen to her interview, she's an operator, in my opinion. She knows how to talk. She knows how to get people comfortable. She has a very nice voice, a voice that kind of you can listen to it, right? It's not she doesn't sound like Large Marge or anything like that, but she lays a pretty good case out. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. I think in that interview, she's just saying things to give off a certain impression to defend her family and kind of bring this whole fishing expedition to a halt. That's my opinion. There's a hell of a lot more to this. One big thing in this that I just can't seem to I can't seem to shake it. It's one of the things that bother me the most. She says that she was trying to get this thing. Her family was trying to get this guy Berkowitz off the street, not because they knew he was a son of Sam, but because they knew he was a nut job. And she talks in the interview about being ran off the road in Mamaroneck and being shot at. She never reports it. The only things that ever get reported to the police
there's the
that
dog.
we know about is when her parents were involved. Whenever she's involved, nothing. There's no paper trail to back it up.
Right.
It even, and you learn more about her, and she's so tight with law enforcement. She's a dispatcher. She's hanging out at bars where police officers hang out at. She owns guns. She marries a cop. I mean, for crying out loud, why didn't you say anything? She even says she heard about the dead dogs or the dogs being killed in the aqueduct or someone shooting dogs with the 22. I mean, we have the reports on the dogs being shot being found in the aqueduct. There's nothing in there with Wheat Carr as a witness or Wheat Carr as a complaint, as a complainant. I mean.
Yeah, and she, like you say, she was around law enforcement. She could have easily done a police report.
There's a document that Rob just put up, and I appreciate you putting it up, Rob, where, to frame this, I believe this comes from a letter Maury Terry wrote to DA Santucci to more or less get this case reopened.
Right.
And in these two paragraphs, he's talking about Wheat basically stating that she tried to tip off the police, but the police basically say it never happened. So I'll read it out loud. She says that She says she took Carr threatening letters after Burke's name was known to them to the legal counsel of Yonkers PD, Henry Ulrich, in June and July of 77 to ask Ulrich if Burke could be arrested. I reached Ulrich, who says this isn't true at all. He says the only time she ever came to him was after Burke's arrest, when she received a threatening note from him mailed from Kings County. We have that letter in the DA dump as well.
Right.
She says she definitely saw the Wheaties and Wicker aliases in the Breslin letter, reported that to Yonkers cops also. They flatly deny this and say if anything like that was said to them, they'd have jumped all over Berkowitz. For a lady with so many cop friends, it's interesting to note that she wasn't calling all of them on this.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I got a dog, Apollo. I think he might be in my office right now. No, he's not. He's outside. If someone shot my dog and I was with the boys in blue, I'd have the entire battalion at the guy's house.
Sure. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
Right.
You know, another really interesting tidbit here. And
Chris, do you see when they interviewed her boyfriend and he was talking about that she was like a heavy drinker?
Oh yeah.
There's one time that he dropped off at the house and she fell out of the car, broke her leg, and the father came and took her home.
Yeah.
So she's like definitely got some issues.
Right. And you know, I mean, look, I saw that. I didn't want to bring it up. I think we've all had our moments of drunken stupors.
Yeah, that's that could be anything.
Right.
That's me every day.
That
Right.
Me too. Me last night.
You know, I mean, but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this isn't this isn't a goody two shoe over here. We're dealing with someone who shoots guns, drinks with the boys, likes to dance,
that's okay. And what we're pointing out here is the inconsistencies of the testimony. Okay. And I've also believed she has said, okay, I think I've read it on social media, that Maury Terry paid people in Minot to say these things. Okay. Now, I would think that if that was the case, it'd be very difficult to keep a lid on that. Okay. And, really, I mean, you're going to pay people to just make up a whole story about somebody in another state. No one's going to agree to do that. And Maury wasn't paying him millions of dollars, I'm sure. So, why would you do that? And also, really, forget all what I just said. Where's the proof?
Right.
Where's the proof?
Well, the
that
proof
Maury
was,
Terry did this.
I was listening to the recording, and she said that there were a bunch of IOUs written to John or something like that. Do people really write IOUs on a debt? I mean, I couldn't.
I think people maybe used to, but I don't know. I've never.
I was thinking about Dumb and Dumber with the IOUs when they were taking money out of.
I remember that.
I mean, I don't know. Look, she says that her and Lorenzo concocted a plan to get Berkowitz off the street.
Yeah,
and Lorenzo is who?
Lorenzo was one of the detectives in Yonkers. He's all over the reports. It's mainly him and Rossi. You got Intervallo, you got a couple of guys. But she says her and Lorenzo. Hold on one second. Her and Lorenzo concocted a plan to pick Burke up on a suspended license charge. But today she's not saying that. I think I already said this, but it's just this is important. She's saying that the cops never took them seriously. She's putting it on the police. Meanwhile, on a recording with the DA, she's saying that her and the police had a plan to get Berkowitz off the street. Those two things couldn't be so far from each other.
Well, only one of them could be true, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of this.
Be true. Yeah. She said that Lorenzo didn't like her family, didn't like her father. Right?
Right.
Okay. But, that may be true. From what I understood, a lot of people didn't like her father. He wasn't an easy guy to like, from what I understand. Okay.
I don't know.
But I don't know. But it just seems like if you're dealing with something that on this level, I don't think a detective is going to, really be that kind of person and say, "Oh, I just don't like you, so I'm not going to help you with this." If there was actual proof, if there was actual information that and we went through this on past shows on the information that Sam Carr gave the detectives, okay, related to Cassara and figuring out that they were dealing with the same person, Berkowitz, okay, and it wasn't in a Son of Sam context yet, okay, but we know that they, the father, Sam, did give this information to Lorenzo, but then Weed is saying that Lorenzo didn't like him, so he didn't do his job or something like that. I don't think there's any proof of that because he did do his job.
Right. No, I want to believe that she concocted a plan with Lorenzo to get Berkowitz off the street. After they figured he did the dog shooting, after they figured he was doing all these letters.
Right.
Like, get this guy away from me. That's plausible.
Right.
But why are you saying something totally different now? Why is the story changing today?
Now, what about Chris? What about Fred Diegel? What do you have about him?
So during the Wheat interview, kind of, I don't want to say out of nowhere. I think they were discussing the day Harvey was shot, and this is how Fred. No, actually, that's not the case. She mentions that she saw David Berkowitz about 2 weeks prior to his arrest in a car with someone she knew named Fred Diegel. Fred Diegel, she also states, was at her house the day Harvey was shot by who she suspects as David Berkowitz.
He according to his testimony, he was working in the Carr residence.
Right. He was working in the Carr residence. She also alleges that he killed a dog at a construction company that she was involved in with Jim Faulkner. And she also accuses Fred Diegel of stealing $1,000 from her mother. These are bombs, in my opinion. Fred Diegel subsequently is interviewed by the same gentleman that interviewed.
They interview him like the next day, right? Or the same day, something like that.
29th. I think they end up interviewing him.
Right.
But I wrote in my notes the 26th, but that was an accident. So, obviously they had to talk to him. She said that she saw David Berkowitz in a car with Diegel.
Right.
So they start talking to Diegel, and this is why I say you have to look at this thing from a 50,000-foot view. You have to look at all the information, and you have to look at all the information side by side before you can come up with any opinion.
Sure.
When they talk to Fred Diegel, he paints one of the most horrible pictures you could paint of a person when he talks about weed. You can hear the animosity coming from his belly. It's true hatred. I mean, and if you listen to the Weed Carr, recording, she doesn't sound like a mean person, a bad person. She doesn't sound like she sounds like a very level-headed individual, in my opinion. Someone who cares about her family. But I mean, this guy Diegel really did not like her. I don't want to get into the he said, she said.
Yeah, the name calling and stuff. It's not necessary.
I don't need to do that. I think we're all mature here. But the first and I think most interesting thing about the whole thing is this: is her best friend, and I assume maybe someone she hooked up with back then was Jim Faulkner. They were close friends. Fred Diegel was also very close with Jim Faulkner. He had to be. Jim had the construction company. Fred worked at the construction company. But Jim also had an accident where I think he broke his leg. And in addition to having a construction company, he also tended bar at a place called the Mariner in Mamaroneck. It's now called the Duck Inn.
The Mariner.
Yeah. It sits right on the Mamaroneck Harbor. I've gotten drunk there many of times. In any event,
it does exist.
It exists. And it's a great little dive bar. he was friendly enough with Faulkner, Diegel, where he actually picked up all his bartending shifts so he wouldn't lose them due to the injury. I mean, he's doing construction during the day. He's working the bar until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And he's doing this for his friends. So look, Wheat is close with Jim. That's known. Okay. You can find a YouTube video of Jim on their property 15 years ago talking about how great the cars are and how Leonardo DiCaprio goes to the house and so on and so forth.
And he bought that. And he bought the house.
He bought that house, right? I was gonna, yeah. So we know that they're close. Why that? What's the rub? Why does that matter? If Wheat sees Freddie in the car with David, Jim should know David. I'm sorry. There should be she should be able to get whatever information she needs on David Berkowitz prior to his arrest
from Fred,
Jim, because of Freddie
or Jim.
I mean, it's
or Jim
now,
or Jim, right? As well,
right? Or she's flat out lying about Fred Diegel because she hates him and she wants the DA to interview him and bust his balls. I can't think of why she would say that, but why she would act as if David Berkowitz just picked her family out of the clear blue sky and started harassing them. None of it makes any sense. It's
yeah.
I don't know. It's mind numbing how much it doesn't make sense. Actually,
it's crazy.
And I just wonder too why it was never investigated. If we're talking about this now, 45 years later,
right?
Okay, why obviously they were trying to reopen the case. They did reopen the case, I guess, in 79. Even at that point, they could have taken that case a different way and said, "Hey, what's going on here with the cars? What's going on here with?" and investigated that. Why wasn't it ever investigated? Right.
Right.
Well, that brings a whole nother aspect to this case. My understanding is Santucci, and this is going to rub some people the wrong way, but people were saying, well, none of this is true. Santucci reopened the case. They did all these interviews, and they found they didn't have enough information to reopen the case. Right. I don't think that's true. My understanding is the mayor's office shut that investigation down.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then just to go fast forward a little bit, but on the same vein, you all remember from the Netflix documentary, Detective Don Mounts, working the cold case, brought in two guys for a burglary, and they thought they were going to get really jammed up, and they said, well, we have some information that involves the Son of Sam.
Right.
The call went up to upstairs at police headquarters. My understanding from Don Mounts is they called Borelli at home, who was actually retired at this point, but he still holds some sway. They called Borelli and they told him what was going on, and he said, release those two guys, and drop the case. And that was in 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
So it just just because the case was closed in 1979, don't anyone assume it was closed because of lack of evidence. That's
right.
No, that's not necessarily true, and it's certainly not, in my opinion, based on what I know. The case was closed by the mayor's office.
So think about what you just said, Carl. Think about the ramifications of this. Borelli is retired in the 90s. This is 20 years after Son of Sam, and they're still going to him to get permission for this and that. What kind of gatekeeper is he?
Right.
Well, that's I mean, you can take this to the far out levels, or you can keep it very simple. And the very simple answer to that is we all know over 300 cops got promotions.
yeah.
Some cops got double promotions for the first time in the NYPD history. To this day, I have spoken to many detectives that were involved in the Son of Sam case, and they'll tell me things off record, and then they'll always back it up with, "You'll never get, I'll never say this in public. I'll never say this on tape." So so I guess what I'm describing is that thin blue line. I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Like, so some guy opens his mouth. It's a mark, a bad mark on the NYPD
Department. Yeah.
supposedly, and I don't know how true this is, but I've been told that that you can actually lose your pension for certain infractions, and
Right.
so someone comes out of the woodwork and says, I want to come clean, and none of this really happened, and the police covered it up. Besides being blackballed in any NYPD circles, it's my understanding that you could actually lose your pension. So that would answer why no current or former cops are coming forward and saying this isn't true. But I'm telling you, off the record, cops and high-level detectives have told me that Berkowitz did not act alone.
Yeah, and you've said that before. That's true.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah.
No. What more do you have about Diegel here?
So we really played it like she had something going on at this construction company with Jim. And she might have been a key holder or something like that, but basically what Fred Diegel says is she had nothing to do with the construction business other than having a key and being friends with Jim. Jim trusted her, so she had a key. It's just another inconsistency. It's another one of it's another instance of her saying one thing and something totally different being said by another person. It just happens too much with what she's saying and what other people are saying. They are always polar opposites. The DA asks Fred Diegel whether or not he stole the $1,000 from the mother. And basically what Fred Diegel said was the $1,000 was for materials for the job. Now, I'm thinking about when I have work that needs to be done at my house. Generally, if a friend of mine does the work for me, I pay him a daily rate and I give them the money for the materials. They buy the materials, they give me the receipt, I give them the money, or vice versa, whatever, whatever it is.
Right.
That sounds plausible to me. He said, look, Jim's very close with Wheat. They're probably paying Freddie a daily rate on the job and give him the money for the materials, and that's it. And she's saying he stole the $1,000. He's saying he bought materials. I don't really want to get into a small claims court argument over this. It doesn't pay, but to me, it appears that, Fred Diegel didn't run away with $1,000. And Wheat, again, is just making something up. And it just shows a track record of not being totally forthright in what she's saying. Another interesting fact about Diegel is he was actually the witness the day of the Harvey shooting, the day the dog was shot.
Right.
He spends a little time talking about Harvey and so forth. But the main thing that I took away from what his comments were was when we got back from the veterinary hospital, she said that the dog was shot by a .45. We all know that's bullshit because a .45 would have blown the dog up most likely, or at least
Yeah.
You can't. You shoot a dog with a .45, it's going to blow a hole in it, gigantically.
Right, and I would say that doesn't matter really in the grand scheme of things, but it kind of does because for whatever reason, Yonkers police wanted to know what kind of bullet was in the dog. It was important to them.
This was after the arrest of Berkowitz.
After the arrest of Berkowitz.
Right.
And, you know, for someone who claims to have been the greatest cooperator in this case, we find again that that's just not honest. She's not being honest once again, because Detective Rossi, more or less went to the Westchester County DA's office to subpoena the x-ray of the dog from the veterinary hospital in the city. They were turned down. The DA's office basically said, look, it's a New York City case. We'd rather them handle it. We're not getting involved in this. And the Yonkers police was never able to obtain x-rays, which would give them a better understanding of what type of bullet hit that dog. I think it's fair to assume the dog got shot by a .22, but, you know, Detective Rossi wanted to confirm this and went as far as going to the DA's office in Westchester County to subpoena that record.
Now, if a cop fails in getting a subpoena, something like that, for instance, okay, can he go to, say, Carr or Sam Carr and ask for those records just as a cooperative thing?
I think in this case, 100%. Honestly, I think he already tried that. This was the Hail Mary. This was 10 seconds left. Let me take whatever tools I have out of the arsenal and use them. And it just didn't work out that way. Final takeaway from that interview is, you know, again, Wheat comes across in her interview very calm, cool, collected, reserved, motherly. Fred kind of confirms stuff we already know. She was a gun buff. She says as much in her statements to the DA. But she says it in a context that she's a responsible gun owner.
Right.
Fred Diegel actually gives an account where at the Mariner, she took a small caliber pistol and shot out a rainbow clock.
Mm-hmm.
He really couldn't believe that she was able to make the mark either. But she did. You know, he was asked about the dog that she says he killed in the construction warehouse, I guess, or retail store that they had. And he kind of gives off the impression that she killed the dog.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not accusing her of killing a dog. He's accusing her.
His right. I remember listening to that. He's insinuating she did it. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I don't know. You know, again, I'm not saying that, you know, she did anything, illegal or anything like that. It's obvious she didn't like Fred Diegel. I don't know if she tried to set him up to get his his blood flowing a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, she says to Leifer, I believe, that Diegel and Berkowitz were in a car together, and don't they, if I remember right, don't they outright ask him that? Like, do you know David Berkowitz? He says no, right?
Right. No, he says no.
Yeah, he doesn't know who he is.
I mean, and that may not. He could be lying about that. Him and David Berkowitz
could be.
Known each other. You know, he lived in New Rochelle. Fred Diegel on Pelham Road, I think, and Berkowitz lived in New Rochelle for a short period of time on Coligny Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Diegel sounds like he has a Bronx accent. He could have been a Pelham Bay guy. Could have lived near Berkowitz over there. Who knows? But you know, as far as him being in a car with Fred Diegel, I would imagine that we would have something to say about that, because I'm sure Jim Faulkner could have figured out a way to understand the relationship with Fred Diegel and David Berkowitz if there were one. And it's kind of important for her. I if she's watching, I would appreciate for her to maybe comment and tell us what that relationship was, because I think it would be days. And I think interested parties care to know, you know.
Yeah.
And that's really all I have on the Carr interviews. And I really only wanted to talk about this today with you guys and with the folks that are watching, because look, she's a pretty powerful voice in the anti-Maury Terry army.
Yep. Army.
I
don't think it's an army, but okay.
Maybe give him. I'm giving him a little too much credit, but you understand what I'm saying.
It's a loud group of people. That's about
right.
it. The other part we wanted to talk about, change gears here for a minute, and get off this topic, is the concept of Mr. Real Estate.
Right.
And I'm just going to take the liberty here to kind of talk about what, in the Ultimate Evil, in the original edition of it that came out in '87, there's really no mention of Mr. Real Estate.
There is.
This is something that came later on in expanded versions of the book. Maury would, update things, right, Carl?
Yes.
Okay. So then you had this concept of Mr. Real Estate. Well, who was Mr. Real Estate? One guy that he was looking at was a guy named James Donovan. So you have some information about this, Chris, right?
Yeah.
You're going to give a little introduction because you're kind of researching this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most, I guess, biggest takeaways from the book, The Ultimate Evil, for me was Mr. Real Estate. And it was because where I grew up. I grew up in Port Chester. I lived in West Harrison. It's all more or less the Sound Shore or White Plains area, which is heavily talked about in the Son of Sam with regards to Mr. Real Estate and some of the people involved with Mr. Real Estate, the Tone Hours of the world, etc. And, I remember calling up my parents, my mother especially, and say, hey, who could this person have been? I'm not going to say the person's name on here because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but Carl and I talked about it privately. I don't know if Carl remembers that conversation, and we kind of had a chuckle about it. Nonetheless, as someone who researches the case, it's something that I've been very much interested in trying to uncover and finally, proving Maury's theory, at least, or proving this element of Maury's theory. So, I mean, I tried to uncover every rock I could on this guy, and I think others who have researched Mr. Donovan have hit some of the pitfalls that I've hit. There's not a lot of information out there on. But here's what we know. Although he was not in real estate, his family, primarily his wife and son, were both heavily involved in real estate. Another fact about Mr. Real Estate was that he was involved in local government or on a board of some kind. Again, it's true, but it's not exactly true. The wife was a president or a past president of the Chamber of Commerce in the city of Rye. And also she was on the Chamber of Commerce in the town of Harrison. Her and her son were both very active in the local real estate community back in that time period. I would imagine that Mr. Donovan himself had some interest in real estate as well. As, I mean, I actually know that we have documents to prove that through real estate holdings and so forth. They were active in local politics. They talk about a big boat. So I have to backtrack a little bit. They're long dead, both husband and wife. But the son is still around, and there's always been this thought that the son was a lawyer. It's not the case. The son was a real estate broker in the mother's real estate office. And I talked to him. I interviewed him. One thing I can tell you is he lied to me about one thing that I don't know why he lied to me. He said he worked for local law enforcement. I ran a check on that. That came back dead. it's not a time issue or a records issue either. When I talked to the woman at the City of Rye, she basically said to me, my mother was a crossing guard 55 years ago here, and she's in the system. So if this guy worked for the City of Rye in any capacity, whether it be police or dog catcher, he'd be in the system.
Right.
One thing he did tell me is that he was the commissioner of the Mamaroneck Marina. In the book, they talk about how Mr. Real Estate would have had a big boat, but not a yacht. And that, I think, plays into what we're saying here. So ultimately, what I think has happened, because you got to remember, Maury got this information secondhand through an informant in prison who was friendly with Berkowitz.
Right.
I think this was more or less a composite because all the different things hit, but they hit
with different people, right?
Within the family.
Yeah.
When I interviewed the son, he tried to act shocked, but he didn't really budge. He wasn't really shocked. It was like, I was surprised that nobody ever reached out to him. I said to him, I was like, your father's funeral was, staked out. There was actually a photo or a short clip of his funeral on an A&E documentary. And he was, he played it off as if he had no idea. I don't necessarily believe that he had no idea. I definitely don't believe that no one out of the thousands of people that have researched this case has ever approached this guy, or that local law enforcement didn't tip him off that people were asking about him or asking about his parents.
What I understand is he was hard to find, but you found him.
I found him.
Yeah. People were confused over who was who, right, Carl?
Right.
With him.
Over who was Mr. Real Estate?
James Donovan Jr.
Yeah. There was a few of them floating around.
Right, but he found the right one.
Right. Chris, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a video clip, but there's certainly a photograph.
Yes.
That is attributed, of six pallbearers carrying the casket down the steps of the church.
Yep.
Maybe if you show that photo to your Donovan fella and say, "Is any of these guys your uncle? Do you know any of these guys?" Because it could be just employees of the funeral home if the guy didn't have any friends or people that wanted to be pallbearers.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do that next. As small as this world is, I have a pretty close mutual friend of the son, with the son. Someone who's helped me be in communication with him. We'll see where it goes. But what I want to say though is the father worked for the independent news company, and this is really important because although he's not it's not a real estate company, it's a company that distributed comics and porno magazines, and I find that really interesting for one reason. I can't remember where it was. I can't remember who said it. And Carl, I hope you could back me up on this, and I'm not crazy. But at one point in this investigation, at least early on, weren't they looking into comic book writers of some kind as being involved in this because of the letters or because of the way the letters were written or something to that effect?
They were looking at. They were saying it's probably somebody in a draftsman or an illustrator. And it kind of pointed towards Michael Carr because he was in that business.
Right. Funny enough,
the porn thing though is interesting too.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting. Because
unfortunately, I don't have that name handy, but I can get it for you, Chris. But one of the members of the official Facebook group just posted I don't know, probably a month or two ago, about a guy that lived in Yonkers who was like the king of porn.
Yeah.
And he retired abruptly, right? I believe right when all this came down.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I vaguely, I don't remember the name.
Yeah, I don't remember the name either. Yeah, but I could certainly look it up on Facebook.
I don't remember the name, but I do know what you're talking about. Look, it's like anything else in this case. It's not exactly cut and dry. It's certainly not as cut and dry as the interviews that we just talked about. But it's something that the more I dive into it, the more I see things that kind of fit. And just going back to the whole, comic book thing. It's kind of funny in Berkowitz's contacts list. There's a name in there, S. Neil Fujita. S. Neil Fujita was an illustrator, a very famous one. He actually did the illustration for the cover of The Godfather, the book. He wrote that.
Yeah, the symbol kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't know why Berkowitz would have had his name. What I've come to the conclusion is he was listed as the person who owned that phone line. And Berkowitz may have known one of the kids. There was another kid that followed in the father's footsteps who was an artist, and his name was Kenji, I think, or something like that. I've reached out to him for comment, but I have not heard back from him as of yet. I'm going to continue on the Donovan trail, and I'm hoping to have some updates sooner rather than later. I will say that I had an interview the other day with someone high level in the former process. It didn't yield exactly what I was looking for, but I wouldn't call it a dead end just yet. I think that story still has some more to it. And when I'm ready to tell it, I will, I promise.
Right. Like this segment here, I just to reiterate, was really just an introduction to what you've been doing lately. It looks like you got some smoke there, though.
Yeah, I'm pumped about it. I'm going to keep working it, and I'm going to get that information out as soon as I can, along with you guys.
Sounds good, man.
Okay, cool.
I got to jump, guys.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Great job you're doing, and let's come back real soon. Maybe in the next month, we'll do another show and see where you're at. I want to thank everybody for watching the Son of Sam Chronicles. Carl, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Rob, keep
Rob.
getting lumped up, man.
See you.
I just, you know what the thing is today? We just talk about, again, every time we talk about, we just open more and more doors. It's ridiculous how many doors get open.
That's this case, man. That's this case. 45 years later, it's still doors are opening.
That's
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's
Is right.
insane.
Yeah.
So, all
Guys, I
right,
gotta
boys.
jump. I'll
Happy
see
New
you.
Year to everybody in the lumped up universe, and we'll see you in a month. Talk to you guys later.
Take care, people.
Take care. From the mold from previous shootings and subsequent shootings, because
Really walkway right here to my left, and went through a hole in the fence and committed this murder. Now he didn't admit this.
from the mold from previous shootings and subsequent shootings, because
Really walkway right here to my left, and went through a hole in the fence and committed this murder. Now he didn't admit